Hello and welcome to Europa Universalis 4. I am Lord Forwind, here with a requested guide for Sweden on how to play them, how to expand, what ideas you should take, starting tactics, etc. First off, let me point out that Sweden is overpowered. There's actually an achievement for that. It's not overpowered on the entire Baltic coastline, but Sweden is a very strong nation. It might have something to do with that the creators of the game Paradox are located in Sweden. It might not. That's up for debate. But Sweden is one of the more military powerful nations in the game. They're right up there with Prussia, France. I would say the Ottomans, but the Ottomans militarily are not stupidly powerful. They're just large. They're a really good nation. However, they start out with some serious issues and some serious problems. First off, as Sweden, you're in a union under Denmark, and as is Norway, so you have to deal with that first. Denmark itself, right currently at the beginning, about equals you in military power. They're a little bit larger, and they'll stay a little bit larger too. They'll get a bonus from having you as a union. Plus, there's Norway. So essentially, you can't easily take on Norway and Denmark at the beginning of the game. There are ways you can try and work it out. You can take bonus morale. You can try and get ideas that help you, but it's not the best move to try and break free at the beginning of the game. You can try and do stuff like get alliances. Support independence, particularly, is a good one. If you can find somebody that will support your independence. Most people will say, like Poland, Burgundy, who usually dislike Denmark, will say, whoops, we can't reach Denmark, which is quite annoying. If you're lucky, you can get someone like England or maybe even Muscovy to help you. But in the meantime, you'll have to deal with being under the Danish yoke, which isn't really that bad. As a union, they can't, first of all, they can't integrate you, so there's no problem there. They can't really force you to do anything other than your rulers the same as theirs, and you can't start wars without them, nor can you have rivals or anything. You don't even pay them money, so that's kind of nice. You start out as a fairly large nation. You have 119 development, which is one of the reasons Denmark is almost a great power. You've got some pretty poor land. You've got on average like 5 to 7 development in your southern provinces. Up north, it's all 3 development provinces. You do start having conquered already Finland, which is nice, but really doesn't contribute much to you. Sad to say, you have several cores. Well, you have one core at least under control of Denmark, and you'll get a mission at some point that'll tell you to essentially reconquer this region for Sweden. Pretty easy to do once you're actually defeating Denmark, which should be your major priority at first. The only other thing you can try and do is Novgorod here is going to fall apart. If you fabricate some claims on them, there's a chance that Denmark will attack with you to conquer some of Novgorod, but in my experience, they don't give you the provinces. They take them themselves and become a bigger threat. Denmark also might invade the Livonian Order, which will drag you to a war with them and the Teutonic Order and any other allies. But luckily, since you're a union and you're a human, you can just hide your army up here in Finnmark or something, and no one will ever bother you. Denmark will get trounced because it will think it will have you in the war. Norway will not contribute much to any wars whatsoever. So, breaking free, you need an ally. You need a good ally or two. Ideally, England's one. You could try and snag something like Austria at some point if they rival Denmark. But overall, you'll have to go strong internally to throw off Denmark and Norway. So the ways to do that. Sweden starts off with some really nice ideas and traditions. First off, they get mercenary maintenance, 25% cheaper. Infantry combat ability plus 20. That is huge. I'm serious. That is huge. The only other nation I think that has infantry combat bonus to that large is Prussia. And I can't even remember if it's 20, but you get it from the beginning of the game, which means your infantry troops are amazing. Once you finish the whole Swedish idea tree, you also get +1 land leader shock, which is nice. Your first idea is pretty useless. 1 legitimacy, it's nice. Then you get discipline, 5%, cavalry cost negative 10%, manpower recovery speed plus 20%, which is huge because you don't actually have that much manpower. This land is not that good, sadly. You look huge, but it's not that beneficial. Then you get stability, 10% cheaper, plus yearly absolutism, plus 20. Again, it's pretty unusual to get yearly absolutism. There aren't many countries that get it. It's small, but it's still useful. Then you get plus 10 goods produced, and then at the end you'll get national manpower plus 10. But really most of your strength comes from the discipline, manpower recovery speed, and the infantry combat ability. If you notice, you have no like morale bonuses and stuff, so that's one of the things you'll want to pick up first. Plus your land up here is pretty Arctic. Put it mildly, you're going to be getting severe winters a lot of the time, which makes one of the best idea groups for you defensive ideas. Now, if you're planning on sort of turtling up and becoming really strong internally before taking on Denmark, you might consider doing something like economic ideas first, just so that you make more money, have more buildings, and can actually develop your land without suffering huge costs of doing so. But me personally, I try and snag defensive ideas. The 15% morale is huge. At that point, you have a much stronger military than expected. If you focus military ideas, which you start out focusing military power, you have good rulers, which is not up to you, it's all up to Denmark. But you get that 15% morale, you get a good ally, you can probably take on Denmark. Now, what you want to do in the first war with Denmark is, by and large, you want to try and retake these four, you want to take these four provinces. They're pretty good development, 29, 5, 8, but also they weaken Denmark's control over Norway, which isn't huge because Norway is almost always going to remain loyal, but it means that Denmark is going to have a smaller army. The ability of you getting Gotland, despite it being one of your cores, is slim to none. First of all, it's a castle. Second of all, Norway and Denmark combined are going to have a much stronger fleet than yours. Honestly, I advise you to hide what fleet you have up here and never, or over here and never use it, deploy it at all, which means you're not going to be able to cross the strait here into Denmark's capital region. But if you could take this land, and the way you'll do it is conquer a lot of Norway, try and stack wipe Norway's army, then try and stack wipe Denmark's army. You've got these two forts here, which should delay Denmark coming north, and so you can easily target Norway's army first, then snag Denmark's. But if you take these, that'll help. And then after that, you can either try and take the rest of Denmark's lands, or you can go after taking Norway's lands. I'm kind of torn what you do. Norway's lands are just as bad as your northern provinces, except for their capital and a couple other of their provinces. But it's cheap, easy land to take over. And if you're trying to form a Scandinavian-like nation, which you should at some point, it doesn't give you great benefits, it just gives you a permanent claim on the region. You have to own Norwegian lands as well. But you have to get to Admin Tech 20. But once you can get free of Denmark, the Baltic is kind of your oyster to do with what you will. You can easily beat up any remains of Novgorod that are left. You can easily invade the Livonian Order. If you've conquered Denmark's lands, you can try and poking at the HRE if they're weak or in a war. Sweden has a couple of achievements about messing around in the HRE. Specifically, they have one which is Lion of the North. Essentially, that means as Sweden, lead the Protestant League to victory in the Protestant Catholic Wars. Sorry, I just forgot all about that. It's difficult to do. You have to become leader of the Protestant League, which is doable if you're large enough, and then you have to declare war and beat the Emperor. The other achievement I mentioned is Sweden is not overpowered. Own the entire Baltic coastline, which Baltic coastline, you have to own all of these lands. I'm not sure how far it actually extends up into this region. I assume it includes pretty much up to here, but considering you're conquering Denmark and Norway anyway, this really doesn't matter. That does include conquering provinces like Lubeck and Pomerania and Mecklenburg, which are in the HRE. You also have to try and beat the Polish to the Teutonic Orders, or you have to beat Poland. If you're going to fight Poland, do it sooner rather than later, because Poland, Lithuania, Commonwealth has actually really good military ideas later on. The other thing to watch out for is Muscovy into Russia. They are probably your biggest threat after you've overthrown Denmark and Norway. They tend to want your land. They actually get a mission to do it. My advice, if you can, is try and break free fast enough that you can steal some of Novgorod's lands, which will slow down their growth. If you manage to steal Novgorod from them, that would be amazing. But the odds are you'll just take like Neva and Ingermanland. If you've done that, obviously turn on the Livonin Order. I advise you to attack the Livonin Order, even if you have to invade navally, because usually the Teutonic Order has been beaten up and they're pretty much on their own and easy pickings. Then it's just build up strong enough and then invade the HRE, fight Russia. You can easily beat Muscovy Russia if you do it right, in which case you can conquer all of this area, which is amazing. You've got superior military ideas to Muscovy and Russia, so essentially all you have to do is beat them once or twice, and that'll be easy for you from then on. In terms of ideas, I usually take defensive ideas, followed usually by like economic. If you're going to do a lot of expansion, obviously take administration for the cheaper core cross, but you first have to break free of Denmark. So defensive ideas are really good, either administrative or economic. You might want to consider influence ideas for the reduced aggressive expansion impact, which is huge. 20% means 20% more provinces you can take before people form a massive coalition against you. After that, offensive ideas is really good for Sweden. The siege and the superior commanders is particularly nice. Other stuff you can do, quality is good because it'll give you plus 30% infantry combat with the first idea stacking on top of your existing ideas. Overall, as Sweden, you want to have the best trained, best disciplined army in Europe. And you'll win lots of wars even heavily outnumbered that way. But if you don't want to be heavily outnumbered, snag quantity ideas. The manpower recovery speed and the manpower limit is nice. Once you start taking Russian or HRE lands, you'll find that your manpower pool will go up significantly faster than you'd think it would. Naval ideas, don't bother with them really. There's no real point because you'll want to conquer Denmark and you'll want to conquer a lot of this land region, and people will just march around the whole Baltic Sea to attack you. Just a fleet of galleys stationed up here will probably prevent anyone from sending a navy through there. Other than that, trade, you can take it. It's pretty good. At some point, you'll want to move your trade node if you conquer Denmark to the Lubeck trade node rather than the Baltic Sea, just because you'll have centers of trade and stuff. You'll get more money from it. If you do invade this region, you want to try and pick up the centers of trade, obviously, if your trade node is still in the Baltic Sea. Trade ideas can be useful. I've never personally, as Sweden, found a use for diplomatic, maritime, naval, humanist. Innovative could be okay for you. It would help with tech stuff. You don't want to do colonization unless you're playing it very oddly because you'll be behind everyone else. Plus your colonial range is significantly shorter starting out. Economics is good. Religious or humanist really depends if you want to stay Catholic or go Protestant. I recommend you go Protestant. The benefits are usually better than that of Catholicism. You can get like discipline, morale, stuff like that. Which can be really handy. Military, there's pretty much no bad military idea for you other than naval. Aristocratic, I guess you could do it. You'd be getting extra absolutism per year, but that's about it. As Sweden, you really should be fighting lots of wars once you can break out because you've got such superior military ideas. Espionage is fairly good on you, so it's really personal preference once you've taken the first couple ideas. I do recommend defensive, though, for the morale against Denmark. You already have the military infantry combat ability, so beyond that, the morale helps a lot. And after that, trying to make as much money as you can. This land is poor, so you probably won't be able to actually build up to your force limit without economic ideas or trade ideas. And after that, that's pretty much it. Sweden starts off in a pretty safe position. No one's going to invade you off hands because Denmark's there to protect you. But on the other hand, you've got to break free of Denmark. Once you do, though, once you break free of Denmark, you can usually easily win the next war against Denmark. Norway, snag Norway's provinces, If you take these, you can actually start colonizing if you wanted to, but you're not going to get a big benefit for it because you actually can't steer the trade really to you other than through the North Sea, which means only Canada is really worth for you to take as a colonial nation. Plus, it just slows you down. You want to conquer lands. I've had several of my friends have done mass conquest, taking over Russia and the northern HREs. If you lead the Protestant League to victory, there's a chance that you could even become Holy Roman Emperor of a Protestant empire, and then of course the HRE is vulnerable to invasion in that case. But that's pretty much as Sweden. There's a couple events you have to watch out for as Sweden, but I'll let you discover those. They're nothing too devastating. There's a couple Protestant-related ones that can be nasty, but if you're a strong country, you're pretty good. I would not recommend this to a beginner player. It's rather complex and tricky to break loose of Denmark. Sometimes I don't even succeed at doing it easily. But that's it for this video. Questions, comments below. If you have any other nations you'd like me to do guides for, I have a series of guides already done, so check those out. But then you can request other ones. I also do Let's Plays. Check those out. And I hope to see you in another video if you subscribe and like this one. Bye for now.